100X Club, this is Matthew, and I'm giving you the entire episode in 15 seconds. I could fill starships with the number of times somebody pointed at a game and said, this is the next COD killer, or this is the next Fortnite killer. But never have I ever heard someone say, this could be the Star Wars killer. Until today, there are a dozen solid TCGs, some of them physical, some of them digital, some of them in Web3. So how the heck is Parallel rising above the masses? Obviously, we're talking gameplay and how to be the very best, like no one ever was. But beyond that is where things are going to get juicy today. We are tackling very specific critiques that we've heard from the community. We're getting alpha about Colony, their new AI simulation game. And most importantly, we are going deep space on the ever-expanding IP of Parallel and of their future beyond a trading card game. And if it could kill Star Wars, gamers, degens, ladies and gentlemen, this is Parallel on 100X Podcast. This is 100X Gaming. We are sitting down with the legendary Koji from Parallel. This is your second time on the podcast, but it's our first time ever getting straight all in to Parallel. I'm stoked to have you here. Been trying to put this together for a hot minute. I would love if you could kick things off by just kind of introducing Parallel. I think most people know who Parallel is at this point, but introducing Parallel, what you guys are building. And then secondarily, I would love just to hear the quick story of how you got from where you started before to being one of the legends behind Parallel. Before we dig into everything this episode has to offer, we want to highlight the awesome partners who sponsor this podcast and make it possible for us to work full-time on 100X. They're legends, and we appreciate them for supporting us. Let's talk about Reactor, a proof-of-work blockchain that introduces a brand new economic model, DePIN mining software, a gaming distribution platform, the RKR token, and their game, Minions of Steel, that's proving their thesis by seamlessly integrating proof-of-work token mining with gaming. Through allowing players to mine with their own GPU while playing, not only do they essentially make gaming free, they make software free, and they present an AI-proof income for everyone. If you want to take a glimpse into the future and get there early, explore Reactor's ecosystem at the link below. Crypto does not need to be complicated. Cadena is building the human layer of blockchain by giving the power back to the people and allowing them to build products that make a difference for humanity. Founded by ex-JP Morgan and SEC blockchain leads, Cadena develops easy-to-understand, human-readable tools and solutions that focus on the long-term development of the space, not just short-term gains. Simply put, if we want real, regular people to enter and enjoy Web3, Cadena is making a way. To learn more, check out Cadena.io, follow them on Twitter at Cadena_IO, or watch our episode with them. Astrobit is the king of automated trading, and now they've introduced a freemium model. Put those trading fees to use. How does it work? Sign up to an exchange with one of Astrobit's affiliate links and receive at least 30 free credits as a loyalty bonus. Then earn credits on your trading fees. The more you trade, the more credits you can generate. Use those credits towards trading bots and strategies. In other words, you can create a passive income stream at no cost. Find more deets in the description below. I call you a legend twice. Maybe that's a little bit of pressure.
Yeah. And as I mentioned off mic, I'm running on like 2 hours of sleep, so my brain isn't fully working. I'm probably gonna have to ask you to repeat yourself a bunch of times. But how did we get to where we are? That's like the general gist, right? Of what you just asked me. I'll give you like the like super fast cheesy answer and then like the more in-depth answer. But like really, it's just like making the thing that we always wanted and like really caring about it. And that sounds like such a dumb, simple thing to say. But we started this because me and my buddies were a little bit bored in COVID. We love all things gaming, sci-fi, creating worlds and stories. And we found ourselves with a bunch of free time during lockdown, and we decided like, hey, why don't we put this to good use? I've told the story a bunch of times, but one of our founders wanted to get into the NFT space at the same time. This was like pre the explosion of all that stuff initially. And we decided to just sort of smash it together. But really what came out of it was, a great idea for a game, which was my part, the art, which was Oscar's part. all the tech, which was well, I'm not going to name off all of the founders, but like we all had our sort of core
What
piece
they
that
brought
we
to
were,
the table, yeah.
yeah, that we were like super jazzed about, and ultimately just came from like, hey, let's make the most fun, interesting thing that we can make. And by that I mean, even once we decided to go forward, rather than just sell NFTs, we're like, how can we do something different? And so when you bought the packs, we decided to do packs. And I think this was back when people were just doing individual NFT sales and then doing reveals or whatever. We're like, no, we're going to do packs of cards. And when you buy the packs, rather than just like your standard, like, oh, check your OpenSea wallet at this time or whatever, your MetaMask wallet on OpenSea at this time, and then the like random cards will be revealed to you. We're like, no. Come to our website. We're going to have like a whole cinematic. You're going to like, it's going to look like you're ripping open packs and whatever. And that kind of created a bit of a viral moment, I think, in the crypto NFT space, and sort of a bit of nostalgia for anyone who enjoys opening card packs. And that really went a long way. But we did that not because we were like, hey, this is going to be like a savvy business idea, or what's really like going to bring in the dollars. It wasn't that. It was like, we are the nerds who this thing is for. What would we want to see if someone was marketing this to us? Like, what would make it fun for us? And really, that's what it was. And so when I say like, just really care about your stuff, it's like, approach it from a genuine angle. Because I find that there's a lot of people in this space who are just like, hey, what's the thing that I can sell to other people? As opposed to like, what's interesting to me? If you start from what's interesting to me, and hopefully there's enough people who agree, then you're going to have like, it's going to be like a runaway success for sure. Because, yeah, it's genuine that way. It's not just about trying to make money. If that answers the question.
I dig that a lot. What just to back up a little bit, you referenced that like your coming into this space was, dude, I just want to create the things that I already love. What were you playing before that you thought could be elevated?
Oh man, I don't know about elevated, but obviously,
or just your
like,
spin, yeah.
The very sort of clear ones that I mention all the time are Magic the Gathering and Hearthstone. Those are huge for me. As a kid, I have a bunch of collections of card games that like no longer exist. There's a game called Illuminati, another one called Gridiron. There's a game called Netrunner, which became Android Netrunner, which is like a now closed box game. But it's just like all the fun elements of those games smashed into a new game, plus a little bit of like secret sauce that we added. And I think that is, how you, I don't know, make things, not even just games in general, but when you think about like your favorite musicians, what they're doing is just taking the elements from the music that inspired them and being like, hey, why don't I, smash this stuff together? Like Elvis Presley's like, yeah, why don't I take jazz and blues and whatever, and like American pop at the time, and smash it all together and be like, okay, now I've got like the Elvis thing, and it's, yeah, it's just like, find the stuff. It goes back to what I was just saying, literally, just like find the stuff that you found fun, and find a way to like mix it all up into something new.
This is a great start. I can hear my brother upstairs coming over tonight if my wife doesn't give birth yet. I can hear him. He just walked in my house to bring over some packs of a new card game, a Star Wars game that we've been grinding the heck out of. So I'm like in that moment right now of, oh shoot, he's got a box of packs upstairs for me to rip open. I think as someone who is like genuinely just really enjoying that aspect of a game, I really appreciate and admire that you guys are coming from that perspective to build a game. I think there are, as kindly as I could say it, there are a lot of conversations that we've had that it's really clear that we're talking to someone who is primarily selling something that is awesome versus like building something that is coming from their inspirations and them wanting to enjoy and play. I would love to get right into like just raw gameplay. So maybe we can talk about like the trading side in a second, but raw gameplay of, to you, what makes Parallel so fun compared to these games that you grew up playing, that you have spent your life just having a blast with. If someone was just looking at it I think about my brother who maybe isn't super deep in the crypto space, but he plays the heck out of card games, and I don't know anyone that plays Magic more than he does. Like, what would he get excited about with Parallel when it comes to just like playing the game?
I mean, okay, from a straight up like card game nerd standpoint, right? We have the bank system, which essentially, Magic, you sort of drew lands from your deck. Hearthstone, you just get a mana a turn.
Yep.
Our mana system's called Energy. Basically, you have to take a card from your hand and choose once per turn and decide whether or not you want to use it for its intended ability, like pay its cost and play it,
Yep.
or put it in the bank. And I mean, that sounds kind of basic, and actually, like, it's kind of funny because after we put out the idea for the game and started doing the open alpha or the closed alpha and all this stuff, Lorcana kind of came out, and they have a very similar thing. But the one thing I will say is that what we've tried to do, which I think makes it more interesting and strategic to like the real card game nerds, is we're using that bank as an additional sort of play area. So it's not just like you put cards in there and then they're done, right? Like,
okay,
there's a mechanics centered around revealing those cards. So either like, because they go in face down, so like flipping your opponent's cards face up, flipping your own cards face up. If you have cards revealed, you can do added abilities with your cards depending on the card types revealed. Certain things can happen. You can shuffle cards around. You can play cards from that section with certain cards. So it's just like, most card games, you have the hand, the like play area, and the discard pile. And now we've sort of like added in the hand, the play area, the discard pile, and this other
and
sort of
another
like
play area.
Yeah. And so it just gives you more levers to pull. And it sounds so basic, but and when the idea first came about, when I was thinking about it, I was like, why hasn't anyone really done it this way before? Surely there has to have been somebody. And that's how I knew it was a good idea, because I couldn't really find any other games. And I was like, it's so dumb simple, and yet it hasn't happened. This is incredible. And it kind of goes back to the first question, because about 60-70% of the way through the development of the game, some of my other less sort of card game savvy founder partners were like, hey, does anyone actually even want to play this game? Like, do people care about card games anymore? And I just like looked at them and I was like, I fucking hope so, because we're doing this. I want to play it, but like we didn't do any like hardcore market research, because that's not what we were trying to do, right? It was just like, let's make something that's interesting to us. So I mean, it sounds simple, but that's sort of like a big one. And then the sci-fi element, I think, is like another, again, really like obvious thing to say. Yeah. But every other card game is like fantasy, or it's Star Wars, which is like kind of its own thing.
And fantasy, or like an established IP. Like, it's an established IP, or it's fantasy.
Yeah. Well, okay, but it's not even just that. Star Wars is its own monolith, and I will say the greatest thing to ever happen to Parallel, and this was pre-Parallel's like inception, is Star Wars going to dog shit. Because up until that point, every sci-fi project was like, okay, that's cool, but it's not Star Wars. Like, it just couldn't hold a candle to how awesome Star Wars was in people's minds. And I was one of those people. Right. Like, as a kid, I used to watch.
If you look here, I've got about 150 Star Wars books right here. Like, as nerdy as I can get with Star Wars, but it's in the worst state it's ever been in.
Yeah. And I used to watch the original trilogy like 3 times a day over a weekend. So like 9 times over a weekend. The original, or no, sorry, 9 times 3, whatever, 27 times over the span of a weekend, because that says how much I like Star Wars. But now that it's like kind of not as good as it was, that leaves some breathing room for other fantasy. Oh my God, lack of sleep again. For other sci-fi properties to exist. And so I think we saw that open door and we were just like, no, okay, let's do it, And also, like, we're in like a techno-futurist space, right? Like, all these people are like, oh, we're so early in the technology or whatever, in the crypto and blah, blah, blah. And so, like, by nature, that will appeal, like, sci-fi will appeal to that type of person, as opposed to fantasy, which is kind of like looking backwards.
Right.
I have a quick question here, just on the idea of how you guys started building Parallel. Was the idea always sort of like, let's build Parallel as a card game, the sci-fi features of it, And when did the whole idea of like we're going to expand this IP or this universe into other places come along in the development process? Did you guys just start with the card game, or was it the card game and we have other things in mind already, and that's why you guys built the game to look as stunning as it looks already?
Okay, good question. I mean, I think that we're definitely dreamers, and so it's not as if we had the idea of, hey, we're gonna make this specific other thing like Colony or whatever. Like this is gonna be our next. When we started, it wasn't that, but we were just like, no, we have a great idea here. You know, we're building a world. Card game is sort of like I don't want to say low hanging fruit because it's very difficult, but it's low lift from like a technical perspective,
Right.
to build, right? And it gives a very decent window into what the world of Parallel looks like. Sorry, my partner's phone is ringing in the background here. What the world of Parallel looks like, and so it's just like a first taste. And we knew that we wanted to build out the IP into other things. Like in an ideal world, we want to be. I'm not even afraid to say it anymore. We want to be as big, if not bigger, than Star Wars. We want fucking movies. We want TV shows. We want cartoons. We want, shooters, whatever. Like anything you can get your hands on. We want people to like inject the world of Parallel like straight into their veins, and that's kind of like the lofty goal that we sort of set for ourselves when we first started, which seems insane, but it's just the truth. Like we were just like, yeah, let's go. Let's shoot for the moon here, because like we didn't think we'd get this far, honestly. So.
I mean, that makes sense. I write down very few questions before going into these episodes. I like it to be a conversation. One of the notes that I had written down was that you guys give me a very similar vibe of like, I'm looking at Halo when Halo 1 was coming out. That like, ooh, I could see this IP being way bigger than it is right now. And I think, especially in like the Web3 gaming space, there are not a lot of IPs that are like, ooh, I can see this like as it exists growing into something a lot bigger than it is right now. I'm curious, like before we get into like where that goes, do you see, I don't know how to ask this, do you see the trading card game, the TCG, being super long-term inside of Parallel, or is that like a launch pad? And the reason I ask that is I think there are graveyards full of trading card games that lasted 3, 4, 5 years and then just went away. I mean, you mentioned at the beginning a bunch of ones that you loved that no longer exist. Like, is Parallel a lifetime game like Magic to you, or is it something that opens the door for everything else that is Parallel?
I mean, I think honestly, a lot of those other games don't exist because they were games created in the wake of Magic the Gathering and the like initial, I don't know, like fame of that, if you want to call it that, or whatever craze. I think it's both, honestly. I think like it would be silly for me not to acknowledge that like our goal is to use the card game to springboard the IP into a whole bunch of other different things that people will play and love and blah 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 blah. But I do see it as like an ongoing thing. Like let me put it this way. We've talked, the founders amongst ourselves about like what we would do, whatever. And like, if people approached us about certain aspects of our business, whatever, and we've all kind of decided we would do X, Y, Z, but we would always just make the card game.
Cool.
Right. Because it's like, again, it goes back to like, this is the thing that we always wanted to do.
Yeah.
So like, why would we give that bit of it up? There's like so much more that we could leverage if we needed to, that isn't the card game. So like, yeah, let's just keep our piece for ourselves,
Yeah. With the idea of the goal that you just mentioned, like, hey, we want to take over the entire world with this IP. With that idea in mind, the last time you were on the show, you talked about when the topic of Web3 came around, you were like, hey, you compared it to databases. Like, nobody calls them database games. It's like Web3 allows us to do something that we weren't able to do before, and that's why it's amazing, and that's why you guys exist here. But in order to achieve that goal of, hey, we want Parallel's IP to take over everything, it needs to live outside of Web3, and it needs to get to the point where it's no longer a Web3 game, it's just a really good game. How do you get to that point where you can just stop having people look at it like, oh, this is a really amazing Web3 game, and it's just like, hey, Parallel is just an amazing title?
I honestly, I think it just comes down to exposure, right? Like we were sort of seeing it a little bit with some of the more recent dust up with the Hearthstone Reddit community or whatever. And to be honest with you, like a lot of people are just like, hey, let me just see what the hell's going on here. Like, why are people upset? And then they try it and they're like, actually, this is like, there's nothing to be upset about here. This is actually like kind of fun, you know? And I think that it's really just, if you look at email, okay? When email first started, it was like a novelty to get like an email from your buddy or your mom or whatever. But like you weren't getting emails from businesses. You weren't like transacting and doing business via email, you know, like signing documents and whatever. That would have seemed insane. And I think that like we're kind of in the same boat with Web3 right now. The idea that, I mean, obviously some people look at it as the future of finance and whatever. But for the vast majority of the world, they're like, this is way too confusing. It seems like a scam, whatever. And so you need like a very low hanging or like low barrier to entry way for people to jump in. And I think games are that perfect way. It's just like, okay, at the very least, I throw $20 in this game, and if Web3 doesn't work out or whatever, like the most I'm losing is that $20. It's not like I'm going to throw my financial future into crypto, and then if that doesn't work out, like I'm screwed, right? And so as they get more and more exposed to the technology, to the way that it sort of assists in making the game more interesting, more fun, whatever, then they become more comfortable with all of these things in general, and then we're not even worrying about it. We're not even talking about Web3 the same way that we don't talk about like the tech behind I'm trying to use an American example because you guys are probably American, like whatever the Cash App is that you guys send money back and forth with. You're not like, how does that cash get from this place to that place? No, you're just like, okay, give me your phone number so I can like send you $20.
Press send on Venmo. Yeah.
Venmo, thank you. Yeah, we don't have Venmo in Canada, so I couldn't come up with it right away. But
where in Canada are you from?
Toronto.
Nice. I lived in BC for a couple of years, but I've never been to Canada's East Coast. I'm curious, you mentioned like the price point there, like, hey, I could just throw $20. Is Parallel at a point right now that if I wanted to jump in as a new player, could I throw $20 and build a deck, or is the ceiling way higher than that?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't actually know from an NFT standpoint. I actually have no idea. It sounds like such a cliche thing to say, but like I actually don't look at the market at all. So if you wanted to build an NFT deck, I have no idea. I know that we have some starter decks that you can buy. That I actually don't even know the price point. You've caught me like completely.
Well, if I was here's a question while we're on that. Do I need to have the NFTs to play with like, what does the NFT enable? Is that the whole trading side of things? Is that using it at all? Like, can I build a deck without them being NFTs? What does that look like?
Yeah. So it's the game at its core is free to play, very much like any of the other games that we mentioned earlier, Hearthstone, Magic, etc. You boot it up, you go through the tutorial, you're assigned some what we call apparition decks that you can play with. And basically, those are just non-NFT cards, so they're not transferable, not sellable, and you can't earn the ERC20 token Prime while playing. So if you want to engage with the Web3 side of things, you need to get some of the NFT cards. But if you just want to play the game, same way that you would a Hearthstone or a Magic, you can do that. And then you can earn in-game currency to open and earn your way to new packs. So you can earn in-game currency to open new packs, or you can just like go through the battle pass and get the packs through grinding.
So if I'm like that Hearthstone player that has been super salty on Reddit, I've seen I didn't see it on Reddit, but I saw it all over Twitter last week. So if I'm that Hearthstone player, then I'm like, I hate NFTs, they suck. I can avoid the NFT scene, but I can still play Parallel and have fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can still play the game. It's completely free. And if you want to put money in, you don't need to necessarily buy NFTs. You can do the like traditional battle pass. You can buy in-game currency, very much like any of these other games. And with the added benefit of if you buy the sort of premium battle pass, at the end of the battle pass every month, you have the option of, we put a special card in at the end of the battle pass, and you have an option of minting it as an NFT at the end of the month if you so choose. You can just leave it as an apparition as well. You don't need to mint it. Like you can earn it and have it as a playable card. But if you want to turn it into an NFT at the end of the month, you have the option to do that.
If I don't choose to do that at the end of the month, is that opportunity gone forever?
Yes. Yeah. So it's like a one-time thing. And that's kind of one of those levers we were talking about as far as like I don't know, showing people like easing them into the NFT experience, because it's kind of like, okay, you don't do it one time and you're like, oh, well, whatever, I'm not that interested. But then you see somebody else selling it for like a couple $100 or whatever. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
I have no idea what people are selling them for.
But
But like,
that's not just, to be clear, that's not just NFTs. Like I referenced that Star Wars game that I'm playing right now. Like if I want a meta deck, and the game has been out for a month, if I want a meta deck, it's $600. Like
yeah,
this is physical trading card game. That's trading card games. Like
right.
cards go expensive quickly.
Yeah, and so basically, you see somebody, you know, turn their card into currency, or like get value out of it, and you're like, well, next time I have the opportunity, why would I not do this, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean that's the idea anyway. But like in practice, we have a bunch of people who you know, the players are all over the map. We have people who are like, you know, 40 out of 40 NFT decks, and we have people who are like, no, I don't care about NFTs at all. I'm just gonna play my free to play decks. And I will say that we have had people in the top 100 in the leaderboard that are completely free to play, like haven't spent a dime. So it's not like one of these things where you're like, yeah, but if I don't put any money in, it's like it's got to be pay to win or whatever. No, that's not the case.
Cool. I dig that.
And with the idea of trying to make the transition or that introduction from a free-to-play player who wants to now dabble into NFTs and dabble into the Web3 aspect of it, what blockchain solutions are you guys currently using that allows that transition to be super smooth? Is there something that you guys like, hey, we found these solutions, this chain or these tools that allow that to be as easy as possible?
Sure. With the card game, most of the sort of new user offerings are on base. So, you know, the cost to transact is relatively low. It's very fast. Yeah. So, and all the tools that Base provides is basically like that's our the majority of our onboarding process. And then we have, because of the tech enabled by Base, like the main collection is actually on ETH mainnet, and anyone who has one of these first edition or special edition Ethereum cards, you can actually, if you earn enough experience and enough prime, you can replicate a base version of that card, which is like we'll say like a V2 or whatever, and that's sort of the NFT for all the NFTs for all of the incoming players. So it's not us ever issuing new cards; it's the existing player base providing the new cards for the incoming players.
That's cool. That's really cool. I am curious about two things, just like on the card front, and then those are really the last questions I have about the game. One was just how you guys specifically adapt to evolving the meta. I remember hearing a couple of like critiques, maybe, I don't know, they were outright complaints like 2 months ago.
Okay.
It was like, man, it feels like it's the same 25 guys running like the same couple of decks, and I can't end, like I want to play. If I play ranked, I'm just going to get smacked by these guys that know exactly what to do every time. And I guess that's kind of like going to a local tournament for Magic. How do you guys address that for, hey, you're obviously at a position that you want more new players all the time. That's how you're going to grow. How do you bring new players in without them just getting rolled by those top players?
I mean, it's a good question. There's a couple things that we try and do, although it's been a little bit slow lately because we just went from closed beta to open beta, and we're hesitant to mix it up as frequently as we used to, because, you know, despite some of the protests to the contrary, the game is fairly balanced. It's in a pretty healthy spot. And there's still people finding new decks, which I find interesting, for all the other people complaining like, oh my God, you know, it's like everyone's figured it out. And then someone creates a new deck and then everyone starts playing that deck. And we haven't changed anything, and it still happens. But we also, you know, like I said, in our battle pass, we issue new cards in every pass. So that kind of, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it does help shake things up, because like one of our more recent cards, the Glaive, is now like in everyone's deck. And they're like, oh, this is crazy. Like this card, but like, that's kind of the point, right? It's just like, okay, now you got to like adjust those decks for those new cards. And if, you know, that card in particular has, you know, what Hearthstone players like to call cleave. You know, if wide boards were the meta before, like this is like pretty anti-meta card there, right? And so like there's like some changes to be had. And I think that like we will more frequently be doing some balance changes, but we've been pushing to get our most recent expansion out the door, which should be coming very soon. I can't say exactly when because engineering will probably kill me if I make any promises, but very soon. But once that's out the door, like the balance passes will be coming very frequently because like, you know, while it's an on-chain game, none of the attributes of the cards themselves exist on chain, so we have the ability to like balance the cards in real time. But yeah, I mean, I think that like really the issue isn't so much that the game is solved or anything like that, but our player base is still growing, and we want we need bigger brains in there, like figuring things out before we mix it up, because otherwise we're wasting that content. Like it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but it's the same thing with the expansion. Like we have all the expansion cards ready, and we could have probably released it last month if we wanted to, honestly. But like it doesn't make sense because part of what you're doing with an expansion is reactivating lapsed players, but you want as many lapsed players to reactivate as possible, right? And so we want to be a little bit slower with the balance changes in the content right now because we've just sort of entered the open beta. I know there's some players that have existed since closed beta being like, oh, but us, and I'm like, yeah, but now you're like the like loud minority here, you know, like it or not, there's a whole bunch of fucking new people coming in, and you know we got to cater to them too. So
I have a question here on the cards as well.
Yeah, it does.
On the cards as well, you mentioned how you guys can make changes because the actual attributes of the cards themselves aren't on the blockchain. Do you guys ever get to the point where you guys actually close a set, like with this new set that's coming, where you guys have like a period where you guys make changes, make balances, and then close them forever? Because that's one of the things that I've also heard about from like people collecting cards and things like that. You know, you buy an NFT, supposedly something that's not supposed to be changeable, and then next week, well, now it's a rebalance happened, and my card that I bought for $150 now it's worth $10 because it got nerfed to the ground. Do you guys ever do you guys have those plans to like close a set once you guys feel like it's in the right balance?
No, only because when you release new things that will interact with old things, you sometimes have to change the old thing instead of the new thing because it's healthier for the game. And in fact, like what my plan is, maybe you heard it here first or whatever, but what my plan is really is to like change things more often and more drastically, just so people are used to the idea of like, hey man, like your shit's just not safe, you know? And like that sounds a bit ruthless, but I think that it's kind of important for people to know, like, no, like this stuff can change, you know? Like,
well, and where is the priority? To you guys, the priority is the game being an actual balanced, playable game, not my NFT holding value. So maybe that's like really positive for those Hearthstone guys who've been raging. Hey, like NFT doesn't actually take precedence here. Balanced gameplay does.
Yeah, I mean, some of those people you'll never change their mind because they're like, oh, you're economically incentivizing our game.
Like, what do you think Magic the Gathering does? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, but it's not even just that. It's just like, yeah, all the games were economically incentivized. They were, except the economics were just going in the opposite direction. You know, like it's not, a game isn't more pure because they're just taking money from you and not giving any back. In my opinion, you know,
that's a mic drop moment. Yes, I think that's how I don't know. It's crazy to me as someone who used to not care about crypto at all, did not care about web. Like I was not here because I liked crypto. To go from a point, to come from a perspective of like, I'm a gamer and I hate owning everything myself. And I hate getting to participate in things that were normally closed off to me. I genuinely I cannot comprehend the rage there as someone who didn't care about crypto and was just a gamer. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
Last question I have about the TCG itself is specifically, do you guys have plans? I don't know if it's been instituted. Do you have plans to institute draft play at some point? That's obviously super popular with in-person, like physical TCGs. I don't know how it works with like Hearthstone or things like that. But do you guys intend on having draft play at some point?
I mean, it's definitely on the list. There's no question there. It's definitely on the list because it's one of my favorites as far as like card game modes. It's like the great equalizer, right? It doesn't matter what the decks that like you're not walking in with any
No
debt, so it doesn't
constructed
matter
debts. Yeah.
like what you bought. It's just like how like quickly can you think on your feet or whatever. And I mean, obviously there's like some metas there too eventually, but yeah. So and to answer your question, yeah, it's definitely on the list. It's just like there's so many other things that we want to do, and like one of the things that anyone who's listening, who's heard me talk about this stuff before, will know is like I actively am like, our client is not good enough yet. You know, like the UI, UX, all this stuff just needs to be better.
Needs to improve.
And so like my main goal now is to get that stuff done, and then we can worry about like, you know, other modes, whatever. Like we recently released the tournament mode, which is you know, pretty sweet. So there's like automated tournaments throughout the day, and I feel like that's not something that I've really seen in some of these other card games before. So there are some you know, new options coming, but for the most part, my goal now is to just like get the UI, UX, readability, all that stuff like up to snuff, make it look like good enough standing beside a Hearthstone or a Magic, and then we can iterate on some of the other modes, because like we have it all done on paper, like the draft mode. We have like a sort of like a single player sort of Slay the Spire-esque thing.
Okay, that's cool.
I've talked before about a 3v3 mode that we want to do, which I think would be like incredible. But and again, that all this stuff is designed, but it's just a matter of like,
is everything 1v1 right now, or do you have like a commander's?
No, it's all 1v1.
Variant?
Yeah. So it's just a matter of like getting the calories to be actually be able to get this stuff done.
And on the client side, or the client topic, do you guys plan to ever launch on like Epic or Steam, or you guys just want to keep it to the client because it gives you more freedom?
No, Steam is or Epic is coming in a very, 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 very soon, like a few days probably.
Ooh.
So
there you go.
Yeah. I mean, you can wishlist it now; it's on there.
Oh, sick.
Yeah. So definitely, it will be where, you know, you find your other games that you enjoy. So
go ahead, Cesar.
Yeah, I have another question here, and this is like a more off topic of what we were talking about. But one of the things that I really love about Web3 is the fact that we as players or just community members really feel like have a lot more access to the creators, the teams behind it, the founders. We're able to chat with them on Discords, Telegrams, whatever you want to call it. And that's one thing that I think is missing, and a lot of people love in Web3 that is missing in Web2. But sometimes I feel like, hey, as we get bigger, as these games get larger and larger, I fear that, hey, we're going to get to the point where that connection between teams and community is going to start to break again, because, you know, these games just become larger. What do you think is the right way to ensure that the connections between founders and community members, and that connection that we love in Web3, doesn't get broken or hurt as we move forward?
Oh, that's a tough question, man. Because after having done it a bunch now, firsthand, like, you know, we mentioned off mic that I'm like in spaces all the time talking to people about the game, whatever. Like, how do you stop yourself from getting burnt out? Also, especially when people are telling you like all the shit that you need to do to make your game better. But I think that, like, at the end of the day, at least for now, the expectation's just been set. Like, if you exist in this space, this is how it's got to be. So as far as like what you have to do, I don't think there's we just have to keep holding people to that standard, right? It's just like, without question, if you want to be a proper Web3 project, you got to do this stuff out in the open. But I will say, from like an audience perspective, the one thing that people really have to get behind, and most of them say that they will in theory, it's just like somebody who says they like everything when it comes to music, and then you're like, okay, well, what about this song? And they're like, I don't really like that. It's like, okay, so you don't like everything, right? What people have to do is be okay with projects developing out in the open. And by that, I mean, like, everyone says, oh yeah, that's great, I love that. But like, no, when you see something that's not perfect and you're like, hey, this isn't perfect, it's like, yeah, because we're still working on it. Like, that's the whole out in the open part. If it was perfect, we would be done. And so you know, people just need to have the like, I don't know, grace to be able to just be like, hey, here are the things that I like about this. Here are the things that I don't like about it. I know you're working on it. Maybe this feedback will help. As opposed to like, you know, we see some like Web3 first person shooter come out and people are like, oh, the graphics are shit. And it's like, yeah, it's a gray box, motherfuckers. Like they're still, you know, it's not even close to there yet. The fact that you can run around and shoot people is miraculous, you know, but, so yeah, I mean, I think as an audience member, your part is to just like be okay with maybe offering some constructive criticism, but if things aren't exactly the way that you expect, maybe just say, you know, again, here are the good and here's the bad, as opposed to just like, oh, this sucks, I'm gonna go back and play whatever. I don't know. Name a Web3 game. I can't even name one, but yeah.
And on this sort of idea of community feedback and things like that, one of the things that I've seen Parallel do very well is sort of balance the creator partnerships and relationships between not only Web3 native creators, but also bring in the attention and interest from regular Web2 creators, as you would call them. How do you guys continue to balance this moving forward as your IP increases and new games come out in the future?
I mean, I think that the goal, right, when it comes to these creators, actually, let me rewind for a second. I think a lot of projects would just look at who are the biggest creators that we can get them involved and be like, great, we're good. And I don't think that's not what we've done. For the most part, we started working with creators who started playing our game. We noticed they were playing the game and we're like, holy shit, you know, like Alice Straza is a great example. We're like, Alice Straza is playing our game. This is crazy. I used to watch her like do all this Hearthstone stuff. So then we contacted her. We're like, you're playing Parallel. You know, let's bring you on and do something bigger here. And then, you know, at the end of last year, we had like a creator invitational where we got a bunch of Hearthstone pros and whatever, and we had them play the game. And it wasn't like we had aspirations or contracts in place to like work with them after that. It was just like, here, be a part of this, make a splash right before our open beta. They came in and they played. And then we noticed that like guys like Tyler and Lammy and Fino and some of these other guys were just like still playing the game afterwards. We're like, oh, like their names are still on the leaderboard, or their names are now on the leaderboard. They're like playing. We're like, holy shit. Okay. These are the guys we wanted to work with. And it's not even about, I mean, a lot of the guys I mentioned, and we're lucky, have like audiences, but it's not even about like how big their audiences are. It's just like, oh, no, these guys actually understand what we're trying to do. They actively are enjoying playing this game. These are the people that we want behind us, because it doesn't matter how massive an audience somebody has. If they're like, oh, here's a game, it's okay, but I'm playing it because they're like giving us money, you know. Right. And maybe they're not saying that in words, but you can tell, right? Like when you watch somebody play a game they're not really into, you're like, okay, this is like an ad block.
He's not like,
yeah. And so like you just want to work with the people that actually care about it. And it doesn't matter if they're like Web2 or Web3 people, because again, I don't care about anything other than like, do you like the game? If the answer is yes, like play it, you know? And so those are the types of creators that we want. And so I think that like people can feel that when, you know, when they're watching what, you know, name a content creator play, and like that's all you need.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And I think, you know, the reason why that sometimes doesn't happen with a lot of games is because, unfortunately, there are no creators that enjoy that game. So they have to sort of branch out and try to see who'd be willing to work with them. But on that same idea of what we're talking about, you also had some feedback from a lot of people online saying like, hey, I think you guys ran like a $500,000 tournament. And they're like, why not make it 5 million? Why not entice everyone with an even bigger prize pool? What's your response to that? I know you talked about it in some space, but why not go for the 5 million prize pool and keep it to 500,000?
Well, I mean, there's a number of reasons to do that. I mean, the biggest one being that like $500,000 is pretty sizable prize pool already. But if we were to do like 5 million, let's just say, that's probably maybe, I'm not even maybe, it's like the biggest prize pool in card game history, I would assume. I haven't heard of anything bigger. And I mean, that would be great and it would bring a lot of notoriety. But to go back to what I was saying earlier, like the client still needs some love. You know, we're in open beta. We're still working out a lot of the details. It doesn't make sense to sort of drive that so hard right now when it's not quite there. You know, once the client's like spot on, we're ready to go. We've got a bunch of these under our belt, and it's also about experience, right? Like we haven't run a tournament of that size before. I mean, we've run a few tournaments, and some of them have been sizable, but like that would be a completely different beast, right? And so we want to get some reps under our belt so we understand the trials and tribulations of running larger tournaments like this, and figure out what works, what doesn't work, and then bring those learnings to the larger stage when we're ready. And so I think it's all just like baby steps. I'm not suggesting that we'll never do something like that. In fact, I think it would be pretty incredible if we did. What I'm saying is like, you need to just like give us time, because like, to use the Web3 adage again, like we're so early, it's just the beginning.
How do you have a parallel World Cup when you guys are still trying to build the stadium? Is essentially like invite a million people to come play in your stadium when the stadium is completely under construction. Kind of feels crazy.
Yeah, it's completely insane. It's completely insane. And I understand. I understand when people are like, hey, they have money,
Bigger.
They should do X, Y, Z. But it's like, there's so much more that goes into all of this than just money. Yeah. Like, having money enables you to do certain things, but you still need to execute on those things. Well, like, one thing I tell people, Cyberpunk's like an amazing example, right? It doesn't matter how much money they made, that game wouldn't have been perfect out of the gate. And like, to even boil it back even further, it's just like, okay, if you had an idea for a game and you had 2 people working on it and it's going to take you 10 years to make that game, if you had money and you got more people, you could probably do it in like 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, whatever. But like, what sum of money and how many people would you need working on a project to get it done in a day? It's just not possible. You could have an infinite amount of money and an infinite amount of people, maybe not an infinite amount of people, but you could have like an entire army of people and you still wouldn't be able to finish a game in a day, like of that magnitude. It's just not possible, right? So money isn't the only factor. And so I think that like having that piece of it is great, but having the experience, having the all the other like pieces in place first is what needs to get done, and then we'll deploy the capital accordingly.
And I think it's interesting because, and I see this all over Twitter as well, it's the same people that say, why not make a 5 million prize pool, are the same people that are like, why is this game running a tournament when the game can barely run? Like, the game is running at 10 frames per second, but they're somehow throwing $100,000 at a tournament where everyone's crashing. So I think at the end of the day, it is just really hard to please everyone and to sort of meet everyone's expectations, because the same people that want a 5 million prize pool for a parallel tournament are the ones that are knocking a 50,000 prize pool for a game that's just trying to stress test their systems. And they're like, why are you guys throwing so much money at the game? It doesn't even work.
Those are the guys dunking on shrapnel for not having a perfect game during an STX. So the reality is the loud critic is always going to be the loud critic. And they're going to dunk on anything that is not perfect yet. And honestly, who cares that they're loud? So they can keep screaming while you keep building.
As long as they care, that's all I care about.
That's true. Like, why are they criticizing? Are they criticizing because they're passionate about Parallel and they want it to be a great game because they're having a blast? Or are they criticizing because they bought an NFT once and they're mad it didn't make them a millionaire? Those are two very different people.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm curious. One final question about your guys' IP. You've announced Colony, like that's been announced as maybe the next. I don't know what's actually planned next, but the next extension that you guys are going to put energy into creating. If someone is like bullish on Parallel, the IP, but maybe they're not a trading card player, they don't love TCGs. What does their future, like relatively quick future, maybe not like 5 years away future, but like what should they look forward to? What are you guys prioritizing? Do you have a roadmap that you're prioritizing things? Is it like, hey, a Parallel sneaker collection is coming out soon. I see your sneakers behind you. Is it a Parallel comic series? Is it Colony? Is it a shooter? I don't know. Like what would be your hope for the next thing that you guys get to explore?
I mean, Colony's definitely up there. For sure. I mean, we already have a comic, so if you're interested in comic books, you can go find our comic and read it. Colony's up there for sure. It's more of a, I hesitate to use the term idle game, but it doesn't require constant. It's not about like fast twitch or
you guys called it like a simulation,
strategy.
Like a sim.
Yeah. It's very much like a Colony sim type game where you're paired with the AI and you kind of help it make decisions. And that's super exciting to me because that's the type of game that I can play. I don't have hours to sink into Baldur's Gate 3 or anything like that anymore,
Same.
unfortunately. But this has like some depth to it, but doesn't require your constant attention. So that's definitely something to look forward to. We have, as part of that, we came out with coming out with a tool called Wayfinder, which isn't a game. So if you're looking for entertainment, I'm sorry, but it will help blockchain newbies navigate Web3, because you can use natural language with it and say like, hey, spin me up an Ethereum wallet, and buy me a bunch of Dogwoof hat. And it doesn't matter that Dogwoof hat is not an Ethereum based thing. Like it'll the LLM will like take you through the process of getting those tokens, and you don't even need to know where it's bridging, how all this stuff works. It's just like dumb simple, and it's kind of like another piece in the puzzle that I was talking about earlier. Like you get people in with the game, and then you give them the tools to like do what they want without having to like go to school in order to do this stuff. So that's super exciting.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And if you want to know more, is it wayfinder.ai? I don't know, whatever. You can look it up. Maybe it'll be in the show notes or something. And I will say that like, so the card game started out as like an idea in our brains, and we were just like, we're going to make this thing because it's fun. Our sort of design ethos in general is sort of like that. That's where Colony came from. And there might be some other parallel related stuff in the works that I can't really talk about from other team members who were like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? And then they just started kind of doing it on their free time, because that's just like the parallel way. So maybe there's other stuff coming down the pipe that if you're not so much a card gamer, you'll be into from a game perspective.
To me, it is riveting that you guys said, hey, let's build a sci-fi card game. And now you're building like a sci-fi company, like on the breaking edge of what is currently sci-fi in tech. I mean, I look at Wayfinder. That is wayfinder.ai. I just checked that. We'll put it in the show notes. That is Wayfinder. That is an AI-based video game like in Colony. There's very few games that are using AI to that level. I know AI Arena is pretty cool. They're doing something totally different, but using AI as a companion. I think that's a gaming meta, if you want to call it that we're going to see come out in the next couple of years of like, how can I actually pair AI with a game itself? You guys are on the forefront of science fiction becoming a reality when you started out making a sci-fi card game. And to me, that's got to be so rad. Final question. If someone wants to sit down right now, they somehow have not tried Parallel a single time, they want to play, what should their first step be?
First step is just go to parallel.life and download the client for sure. Or in a couple days time, go to
use Epic. By the time this
Epic
episode comes out, go to Epic Games if you prefer that.
So download and play the game. And the other steps would be, and this sounds like so hokey, but it's not about engagement. Like either get on Twitter or more, even better, just get on the Discord and talk to people, because we have people in our community that like don't necessarily work for us like from a job perspective, but there's guys like Muka who are just fantastic coaches who I send a lot of new players to, especially content creators who want to get into the game, and he'll coach them up and show them like they've written all these guides and it's not just content. Like you can get on calls and talk to them. They'll show you how to play, and they're just other people in the community. And there's like many such people in the Discord looking to help others get into the game. So yeah, join the Discord, engage with the community, and it's like they'll walk you through everything. In fact, some of them have even been known to like give other players NFTs, and like in one case, like an entire full deck of cards for this guy to get started playing. So just engage with the people, because it is new, and everyone's like who's in it is excited about it and wants to get other people into it. Join the Discord, talk to people, and it should be simple.
Download the game, play the heck out of us. We'll see you in there. We'll see you in the 1v1s. Come 1v1 Caesar. He's playing most of the games on our fronts because I'm in the full-time dad mode right now, playing less games than I would like to. Koji, thank you, man, for sitting down with us, letting us pick your brain, get into Parallel. While I know you have not been sleeping, you're like in the same space that I am of there is no sleep. So I appreciate it. This has been fantastic. If you're listening and you want to follow, find, play Parallel, we'll have a bunch of links down here in the show notes. Show them some love from 100X. See you next time.